This is a £705 per kilo rare coffee from South Africa. This is a £100 a kilo cup of excellence coffee from El Salvador. This is a £42 per kilo specialty coffee from Colombia. And this coffee was £19 a kilo from Sainsbury's. Why is this one only £4.75 for this bag, and this was £70.50? And yes, I paid for all of these, no sponsors on this video, but stay to the end if you want to find out how to support this channel and videos like the one you're about to watch. Specialty coffee has grown massively since I started this channel about 8 years ago, and with the growth both of regular coffee and special and rare coffees, it's gotten a lot more expensive. Market commodity coffee is still very affordable and admittedly has improved in what was on offer from just a few years ago. Then micro roasteries and high-end roasters have started working directly with farms to get a much more specific kind of coffee flavor. But over £700 a kilo is really abnormal, and that's because this coffee is actually a whole new species. You've probably heard of Arabica coffee. It's the thing we all think of as coffee. And the other second most produced coffee species is called Robusta. Robusta tends to be that awful dark roasted stuff that they use to make cans of coffee that have names like fire and are all about the caffeine. For years, we've seen a push for more variety, better cultivation, and most recently, more extreme processing methods. You might not have ever tried coffee from China before, but they actually grow quite a lot, and they just keep most of it for themselves. And personally, I've been loving the kind of carbonic maceration and thermal shock anaerobic process coffees that I'll dig into more in depth in a future video or on my Substack. But that is still mostly Arabica and sometimes Robusta. This coffee is called Racemosa, and as you can see, it has tiny beans. This is grown in South Africa, which is not really known for coffee, and in fact, it's the first coffee I've ever bought from South Africa. And that's because traditionally, it's not had the right climate for coffee beans, as it's outside of what we would call the coffee belt. But the Racemosa beans can grow in climates further away than that, and because it's so unusual, there are only a few kilograms of this coffee in the whole world, which helps explain the price. So rather than just ramble on about this coffee specifically, I bought 4 bags of different coffees at very different price points to talk about why they all might kind of be worth the price depending on what type of coffee drinker you are. This is a coffee from Ueshima, which you can buy at the supermarket for about £4.75 for 250 grams. It says that it's a level 4 strength, and you'll notice that none of the other coffees mention strength, because I think it's actually a very confusing term that isn't useful to understand your coffee. Does 4 out of 5 mean caffeine, or the intensity of flavor, or what? It doesn't say. Usually for me, the biggest correlate to strength is actually roast level, which has nothing to do with caffeine, as this is much more determined by the variety. So 4 strength probably just means medium dark roast, and something like a 5 is probably just straight up charcoal. There's no roast date, and the best before says 03/06/2026, so about a year from now. So I have no idea how fresh this is. They might be giving it a year, or they might be giving it 18 months or 2 years. Coffee is best for 3 to 8 weeks after roasting, not a year, friends. Ooh. That is very dark roasted. Next up, this is a specialty coffee from Blue Hour Coffee Roasters down in Southampton. This bag of 250 grams is £10.50, so about £42 a kilo, which is about double the price of the supermarket stuff, but still very affordable for most people. What you get for that price compared to the commodity coffee is a lot, actually. This is a big step up. First of all, there is a roast date. I bought this coffee this week and it was roasted on Tuesday, so about 6 days ago. Oh, wow. Ooh, that's really nice. It's a much lighter roast, and the beans smell way more fragrant and less like that generic coffee flavor, much more distinctive and pleasant. There's a lot of detail about the beans included, the farmers and their growing methods are all mentioned on this little card that they sent with the beans. They highlight that it's grown in Huila, Colombia at an altitude of 1600 to 1900 meters, so they clearly care a lot more about the origins of the beans, who they're buying them from, and supporting the farmers properly. There's no mention of strength, but we do get a list of flavors we can expect to find in the coffee: stone fruits, raisins, and chocolate. So this is the SCA tasting guide. In my experience, the more expensive the coffee gets, the closer to the outside of this tasting guide we can taste. Specific flavors start to come out more punchy, so while the cheap coffee might taste roasty, nutty, or chocolatey. With a more expensive coffee, we might start getting things like stone fruits, dark chocolate, berries, and things like that. Then when we get to the even more expensive coffees, we get very specific flavors, which I'll explain more when we get into the tasting section of the video. Next, we have this more expensive specialty coffee from Dubov Coffee in Madrid, which is a Cup of Excellence winner. This bag goes for around £20 for a 200-gram bag, which is £100 a kilo, so more or less double again from the Blue Hour Colombian. This is a very prestigious competition for coffee growers, and the best coffees bring a lot of attention to the farmers. This one's from El Salvador, and it's grown at a very high altitude of 2,300 meters above sea level, which often brings out exciting flavors in coffee. Coffee plants grow slower at higher elevations because of less oxygen in the atmosphere, cooler temperatures, volcanic soil that's rich in minerals like potassium, and higher exposure to UV, amongst other things. This can mean getting some really exciting flavors. For more expensive coffees like this one, what's interesting is it often isn't the most exciting or unusual flavor that wins at competitions. When you taste these coffees side by side, yes, you do get hit with coffees that use unusual processing methods like anaerobic fermentation, but in my experience, the more coffee cuppings I do, the more I realize that excellence in coffee is about the delicateness, the sweetness, the balance, the complex acidity that actually shows the quality of the beans. Processing methods that change the coffee significantly when compared to something like a traditional washed or natural process are very, very different, and they're not always the best coffees themselves. Okay. And this is a much lighter roast. That is a very, very light bean. It's almost cinnamon. Finally, we have the impetus for this video, the racemosa, which is grown on a micro lot and roasted by special guests in London. This 100-gram bag was £70.50, making this £705 per kilo, so about 7 times the price of the Dubov coffee and the most expensive coffee I've ever bought. I'm actually almost nervous to brew anything with this. Could you imagine trying to pull an espresso shot with this? Every shot you screw up trying to dial in is going to cost you £15. Whew. What on earth? That is tiny. Oh my god, these beans are absolutely minuscule. So then why is this so expensive? Like Eugenioides, which is another variety that made a splash recently by winning competitions, this is a different species of coffee and it's incredibly rare and unique. I actually wanted to try the Eugenioides, which is an ancestor of Arabica, but unfortunately that was very popular and they'd all sold out. But I think this one is actually even more expensive. So while Robusta is a much higher caffeine, but I would argue worse tasting coffee than Arabica, this one is very different. The flavor notes on the bag here say aniseed, baked apple, and dried mint. Very, very unusual flavors for coffee. It's also naturally very low in caffeine, so I don't think it'll be replacing Arabica for the average coffee drinker anytime soon. Charles Denison's farm is one of the only places where it's grown, and it's likely I've never tasted anything like this. Oh, that is so weird. So the flavors of the coffee are locked in the bean, and we can talk all day about brewing methods and getting the most out of coffee, and most of my videos on my channel are about espresso and getting great extraction and the technology and techniques that help us to do that. But the flavors in the beans, and you can't magically get flavors out of coffee that aren't there. In coffee, there's an objective grading scale for the quality of flavor. People called Q graders assess the quality of the beans, just like a sommelier would be able to tell you why a certain wine was great or not. And while wine has around 800 to 1,000 identified volatile flavor compounds for sommeliers to learn and taste and detect, coffee has between 1,000 and 1,500, with new varieties, cultivation methods, and processing leading to more flavors being added to this all the time. So basically we're better than wine people. A lot of the commodity coffee, that would be the coffee that Q graders rated at below an 80 score, is harvested by machines, not differentiated based on where it is in the growing process, and may end up contributing a lot of negative flavors to your cup. For large-scale growers like this, the quality of the coffee isn't the most important thing, and a lot of that coffee is roasted quite dark to obscure the bean's natural flavors and differences, as well as any defects. Just like if you burn the crap out of your toast, it doesn't matter if it's sourdough or just cheap white bread, it's charcoal now. Taste is subjective for sure, and some people will like certain flavors over others for whatever reason, but grading is about scoring a coffee based on the qualities expressed by the bean, and is at least trying to be objective. Okay, so let's cup these coffees and do this. By the way, I've also got a page for each one of these in my Brew Ledger, and later on I'll write down the flavors I'm getting, and I can tell from this how to adjust next time to get even better coffee. It's definitely very sweet, a lot of complexity, very low acidity, not anything sharp coming to mind, but the flavors are just the most unusual flavors that I've had in coffee. I feel like this is the kind of coffee that I would taste as something interesting and weird and different, but not something that I would want to have every morning. I'm gonna try this with espresso, and it's gonna be really painful to try and dial this in, but no, it's gonna cost me way too much money. Very unusual. That's definitely the Racemosa for sure. This one is lighter. Now that it's cooled down a bit more, I'm tasting a lot more of that acidity. It's like a really vibrant acidity, really lovely, like an apple or an orange. You know, that kind of like not citrusy, but like just tart sweetness. Probably like an apple or a pear. Very fruity, very fruit forward. Okay, that might be the Dubov actually. Oh, that's even lighter. Wow, that's a very delicate coffee. Wow, so balanced. Man, I could drink that all day. That is really nice. It's a little bit more mellow. It's still very balanced, still very sweet, great complexity. This one I think is the Blue Hour. Really, really delicious. That's actually my genuine first reaction. Ugh, that's horrible. Ugh, that's the Ueshima. I think it could get you to caffeine in the morning if that's what you're looking for, but there's very little sweetness, no acidity whatsoever. It just tastes like liquid burnt toast, very strong, like brutal kind of dark roast flavor. And if you like that kind of flavor of coffee, if you're the kind of person who's used to that, then it'll be fine, but oof, that was not very nice. Not touching that one again. This is so it's Racemosa, so the special guests, Blue Hour, Dubov, and Ueshima, I think. So how do I even begin to answer this question about whether this crazy expensive coffee is worth it? Really, it's not your daily coffee. I bought this for an experience and to understand what's happening in the coffee industry. Producers are looking for alternatives to Arabica because it's getting harder and harder to grow in some places, and different species of coffee are, as it turns out, really, really different. I don't think this is going to be anyone's daily brew. There aren't any celebrities out there waking up in the morning like, I just can't start my day without the most expensive coffee money can buy. I mean, there might be, but that's weird and that's not about coffee. I do switch coffees a lot anyway and try lots of different things, but this flavor is really not something I would even want to get used to for a morning espresso. I think for the vast majority of people, including coffee lovers, coffees at the price point like Blue Hour or Dubov are going to be a fantastic daily morning espresso, and I don't expect that to change much. But it is a cool and unique experience if you like tasting coffee, and I'd highly recommend buying a more expensive bean as a treat for yourself every now and then, and just really to experience the flavors you might not be used to. So please like this video if you found it interesting, and check out the link in the description to get a Brew Ledger. It really is an incredibly useful book. And thanks so much for watching, you wonderfully overcaffeinated people, and I'll see you on the next one.